Imagine waking up one morning and learning that just 2% of the world's population decides the direction of your job, your income, your opportunities, even your future. That the house you live in, the price you pay for food, and the level of comfort you can afford is indirectly shaped by a group so small you could fit them all into a few stadiums? What if I told you that this isn't a conspiracy theory or an exaggeration, but a pattern that has repeated itself across civilizations, across centuries, across every major economic system that has ever existed? Why does 2% of humanity end up controlling nearly all of humanity's wealth? And more importantly, why do the remaining 98% never see it happening until it's too late? Stay with me, because once you understand the 2% rule, you won't see society the same again. We live in a world that appears democratic, competitive, and opportunity-driven. A world where we are constantly told that everyone has an equal chance, that hard work naturally leads to prosperity, and that the market rewards those who deserve it. But beneath this comforting narrative lies a silent mathematical, psychological, and historical force, one that has silently shaped the distribution of wealth for thousands of years. Today, we're diving into the 2% Rule A phenomenon, where a tiny minority accumulates the majority of resources, power, and influence. It doesn't matter if the system is capitalist, socialist, feudal, or digital, the pattern emerges again and again. Most people never notice this process while it's unfolding. They assume everything is random. They believe inequality is just an accident. But the truth is, the 2% rule is not an accident, it's a mechanism. In this documentary, we're going to break the illusion. We're going to explore why power concentrates, how wealth gravitates toward the few, and what hidden structures in society make this outcome inevitable. If you've ever wondered why economic freedom feels harder every year, or why opportunities seem to shrink while billionaires grow exponentially, prepare for a deep dive that will change your entire perspective on wealth. The central idea of this documentary is simple. Wealth concentrates, always. Not sometimes, not occasionally, always. Whether we're talking about ancient empires, medieval kingdoms, early capitalist societies, or the digital age of algorithms and automation, wealth naturally flows upward toward the top few percent. This development isn't just economic. It's psychological, systemic, historical, and mathematical. Human behavior gravitates toward hierarchy. Systems reward efficiency, and efficiency rewards scale. Power feeds on power, information feeds on information, and money feeds on money. The 2% rule is the outcome when all of these forces collide. In theory, society promises fairness, opportunity, and meritocracy. In reality, the game is uneven, and the forces shaping it are invisible to most people. Once you see them, you can never unseen them. To understand the 2% rule, we must travel back to ancient civilizations. Take the Egyptian Empire. While millions built the pyramids, just a small priestly and royal class controlled the grain, the land, and the destiny of the entire population. Move forward to ancient Rome. A few senatorial families controlled almost every major estate. In medieval Europe, while peasants worked the land, the aristocracy less than 2% owned nearly everything. But here's the key point. None of this was officially announced. No one said, only 2% should have the wealth. It happened because resources accumulate like water flowing downhill, naturally, predictably, inevitably. Every empire, kingdom, and nation-state saw this pattern emerge. Even when revolutions occurred, when wealth was redistributed within a few decades, the 2% rule resurfaced. The fascinating part is that history books rarely highlight this pattern. They talk about kings, wars, and empires, but not the underlying gravity that kept pulling wealth upward. This pattern continued through the Industrial Revolution, where factory owners, small in number, accumulated vast fortunes while workers lived in bare survival. The language changed, the tools changed, but the rules stayed exactly the same. Now let's talk psychology. There is a phenomenon called social asymmetry. Most people overestimate fairness and underestimate how much control the top actually has. We are conditioned to believe someone else knows better, or they must deserve it, or if they're rich, they must be smarter. This belief is so deeply embedded that even in democratic societies, we naturally trust leaders, corporations, brands, and wealthy figures more than we trust ourselves. This trust creates a psychological gateway. Once people accept a hierarchy, the elite begin accumulating power quietly, gradually, invisibly. Humans are also wired to follow the crowd. We copy behaviors, trends, and values. The 2% understands this. They create the narrative. They control media, institutions, and perception. When you guide what people believe, you guide how they act. When you guide how they act, you guide where their money flows. And when their money flows, wealth accumulates at the top. But here's the twist. The 2% don't need to force anything. They simply design incentives. People will follow voluntarily. To understand why the 2% rule persists, we need to expose the mechanisms that operate behind the scenes. The first mechanism is compounding. Money attracts more money. If two people earn the same amount, but one invests and the other struggles with bills, their financial destinies diverge drastically over time. After 20, 30, or 40 years, the gap isn't 2x or 5x, it's 50x or 100x. Compounding is simple yet mathematically ruthless. The second mechanism is access. The wealthy don't just have more money, they have better information, better networks, and better opportunities. While the average person sees risk, they see strategy. While others rely on salaries, they build assets. The third mechanism is control over systems. When corporations, governments, and institutions are shaped by a small group of decision makers, the rules of the game are written to protect their interests. Tax structures, property rights, financial instruments, trade systems, they all evolve in ways that benefit the few. The fourth mechanism is technology. Digital platforms, once thought to democratize opportunity, ended up concentrating power even faster. Algorithms reward scale. The largest companies have the most data. Data becomes intelligence. Intelligence becomes dominance. And dominance becomes wealth. What we call the modern economy is in many ways a series of funnels, each guiding resources to the top. Look closely at today's world and the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. The stock market, the top 10% owns more than 89% of all shares. The global real estate market, a small elite group owns a majority of the prime land. The digital economy, 5 major companies control the data and platforms used by billions. Even in emerging markets, the same pattern emerges. Wealth consolidates in the hands of a politically connected minority. Consider Billionaires. In 1987, there were about 140 of them. Today, there are over 2,700. Yet the global population hasn't increased by 20x. This means wealth is concentrating faster than ever. Think about housing. A few investment firms now buy entire neighborhoods, determining rent prices for millions of families. Or consider agriculture. A handful of corporations control seeds, fertilizers, and food distribution. This isn't random. This is the 2% rule in real time. One of the biggest myths is the belief that markets are fair. They're not. They are structured environments shaped by laws, policies, and financial tools designed by those in power. If you control the rules, you control the outcomes. Schools rarely teach financial literacy. They don't explain how wealth works. They don't explain debt traps or the psychology of consumption or the mechanics of inflation. A population that doesn't understand money becomes easier to manage. Meanwhile, the top 2% invests in assets that grow faster than the economy itself. Real estate, companies, intellectual property, and automated systems. These assets generate wealth even when the owners are asleep. Everyone else exchanges time for money, and the clock never stops. The system appears free, but the outcomes are predictable. Just like a casino, you can win a few hands, but the house always wins in the long run. Most people misunderstand wealth concentration for one simple reason. They look at the world through the lens of their immediate surroundings. If their friends and community are financially similar to them, they assume everyone is. But wealth grows exponentially at the top and slowly or not at all at the bottom. The top 2% live in a completely different ecosystem, access to global markets, private networks, specialized advisors, and exclusive opportunities that never appear on public platforms. The average person sees a job posting. The elite see ownership. The average person sees salary. The elite see equity. The average person sees savings accounts. The elite see investment vehicles with 10x returns. The worlds are different yet invisible to each other. We must shift our mindset. Instead of viewing the world as fair or equal, we must recognize the patterns beneath the surface. We need to notice how influence flows, how information shapes decisions, how opportunities are distributed, how incentives drive behavior, how systems quietly move wealth upward. Once you see the pattern, you begin recognizing who benefits from a policy, who profits from a trend, and who controls a narrative. You start asking the right questions. Who owns this? Who gains from this? What is the unseen cost? You stop believing in pure chance and start seeing structure. This understanding doesn't just protect you financially, it empowers you, it prepares you to move strategically, to build assets instead of just income, to think long-term instead of short-term, to observe society from above rather than from within. The 2% rule is not an enemy, it is a reality. And once you grasp it, you can use it to shape your own destiny rather than being shaped by others. Wealth concentration isn't a glitch in the system. It is the system. It always has been. The names change, the technologies evolve, the borders shift, but the pattern remains. A small group accumulates the most resources because they understand how the game works, while everyone else simply plays it. Today you've seen the historical roots, the psychological foundations, the hidden mechanisms, and the modern-day examples of the 2% rule. You understand that this isn't about luck or coincidence, it's about structure, incentives, and human behavior repeating itself across time. So the next time you look at the world, at the cost of living, at corporate power, at political decisions, at the rise of billionaires, remember the rule: wealth flows upward unless you position yourself differently. As one philosopher once said, if you don't understand the system, you are controlled by it. But if you understand the 2% rule, you no longer walk blindly. You walk with awareness, and awareness is the beginning of power. Thank you for watching, and remember, the world is not what it seems. But once you learn to see the patterns, everything becomes clear.